Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to this presentation of the new issue of the quarterly IEA Gas Market Report. My name is Gonzalo Castro de la Mata. I am the CEO of the EARTHNA Center for a Sustainable Future in Doha, Qatar. EARTHNA is a research and policy center on sustainability, and it is a great pleasure to host the release of this important report that is prepared by the International Energy Agency. We're very happy to be hosting this release in the Middle East. And today's agenda includes the release of the report itself. The presentation will be made by Gergely Molnar, energy analyst on natural gas with the IEA, by Megumi Kotani, hydrogen analyst and consultant with the IEA. After the report presentation, Dr. Marcello Contestabile, chief economist with the Qatar Environment and Energy Research Institute, KERI in Doha, will have some reactions, particularly focusing on energy transition. And then afterwards, we will have about 20 minutes for questions and answers from the public. And those questions you can pose through the Q&A button in your screen. So with that, it's a pleasure to ask Gergely and Megumi to please present the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gonzalo. Many thanks for your kind words of introduction. My name is Gergely Molnar. I'm a gas analyst at the International Energy Agency, and indeed it is great to be back in Qatar, even though just virtually. And today it is a particular pleasure to share this virtual stage with my colleague Megumi Kotani, with whom we are going to present a quarterly gas report, which has been released just about 2 weeks ago. The report gives an overview of the 2022-23 heating season and provides a forecast for the remainder of 2023. It includes also, for the very first time, a special spotlight on e-methane or synthetic methane. And today's presentation will be very much structured along those lines. First, we will have a brief discussion around the global gas market dynamics, then a closer look on what is happening on the European market. And last but not least, we are going to discuss the e-methane developments. The report is available free of charge on our website on the link as displayed on this slide. Now, this chart gives us sort of a look back to the gas supply shock witnessed in 2022 when Russia halved its pipe gas deliveries to the European Union. And this translated into a drop of approximately 80 BCM in absolute terms, which roughly equates to 15% of the global LNG trade. Now, this obviously led to a reconfiguration of global LNG flows, drove up natural gas prices to record highs, both in Europe and Asia, and also necessitated a sometimes painful readjustment in natural gas demand. But when we are looking at sort of the most recent market developments, we see that supply-demand tensions have moderated down quite significantly since the start of 2023. And this is also quite reflective when we are looking at the gas price dynamics. So on this chart, we are showing the 3 key gas benchmarks: TTF for Europe, Henry Hub for the United States, and Asian spot LNG. And in all cases, we see that they have declined by approximately 70% compared to their mid-December highs. Today, TTF is trading below $11 per MMBTU, and Asian spot LNG prices have fallen to below $10 per MMBTU, which means that both TTF and JKM prices are trading below the oil index price range. In comparison, TTF prices averaged at over $40 per MMBTU in 2022. So this is a very substantial decline compared to the price levels we witnessed over the last year. And in the United States, the mild winter in Q1, together with the strong growth in domestic production, also put downward pressure on Henry Hub prices, which are at the moment trading at around $2 per MMBTU. Now, I think it is quite important to note that this easing of market fundamentals has been very much enabled by the demand side, by the continued demand reduction across key gas markets during the 22-23 heating season. And on this slide, we are showing the year-on-year change in natural gas demand across three key gas markets we are tracking particularly closely, namely OECD Europe, the United States, and the big four in Asia, namely China, Japan, Korea, and India. And what we can see on this slide is that altogether, these markets, which represent approximately half of the global gas demand, their consumption during the 22-23 heating season declined by approximately 5%. And of course, this huge demand reduction was largely driven by the European market, where a number of factors contributed to that demand decline, and we are going to discuss this a bit more in detail in a couple of minutes. But we have seen also demand reductions in the Asian markets, largely driven by Japan, Korea, and India, amidst improving nuclear availability in Japan, as well as milder weather conditions. In contrast, in the United States, we have seen an increase in gas demand over the winter season, but most of this growth has been concentrated in the last quarter of 2022. And when we are looking at the first quarter, we see that United States gas demand declined by approximately 3% due to unseasonably mild weather conditions. Now, when we are looking at the supply side, we see that the picture for 2023 remains rather tight. On this chart, we are picturing the main global gas trade factors, which includes European pipeline imports, global energy supply, and China's pipeline imports, both from Central Asia and Russia. And I think what is quite important here is that in our forecast, Russian piped gas deliveries to OECD Europe will decline in a range between 35 to 40 BCM in 2023. In contrast, global energy supply is going to increase in a range between 20 to 25 BCM. And as such, incremental LNG supply is not going to be sufficient to offset the decline in Russian piped gas deliveries, which will naturally tighten the supply picture in 2023. This slide gives us a closer look to the LNG supply dynamics in 2023. As noted previously, we expect that global LNG trade will increase by roughly 4% or just above 20 BCM in 2023. And this growth will be very much driven by the United States, which alone will account for half of incremental LNG supply. This will be supported by the ramp up of the Calcasieu Pass LNG terminal, as well as the return of Freeport, which is now running again close to its nameplate capacity. In addition to the US, Africa and South and Central America will also contribute with around 10 BCM this year. And this will be partly supported by improving feed gas supply availability, and partly with the start of new energy projects, including the Kora South FLNG and the Congo FLNG projects. In contrast, Russian LNG output is expected to decline this year. The Sakhalin LNG 2 plant is going to run at nameplate capacity, which is a move away from the peak load strategy the plant has been pursuing in recent years. And at the Yamal LNG plant, we expect production to decline by around 5%, based on the public announcements of the management of Novatek. But what is also quite important to note, and this is something we show on the second graph of this slide, is that around 25% of the incremental LNG supply this year is expected to come from improving feed gas supply availability. And there is obviously some uncertainty around these volumes, especially when we are looking at the recent developments in Egypt or Nigeria. So this slide gives us a sort of overview of the gas market demand dynamics ahead of 2023. For 2022, our best estimate is that global gas demand declined by 1.5%, which is a similar reduction to what we have seen in 2020 when it was the year of COVID-related lockdowns. Considering the tight supply picture, we expect that global gas demand will remain broadly flat in 2023. Most of the growth will be concentrated in the Asia-Pacific and the Middle Eastern markets, but this growth will be almost entirely offset by the demand reduction in the North American and the European markets. In Asia, we expect gas demand to increase by around 3%, largely supported by higher gas use in the industrial sectors of China and India. Meanwhile, we expect a demand reduction in the more mature markets of Japan and Korea due to the improving availability of nuclear power generation. In the Middle East, we expect gas demand to expand by around 2%, driven by markets such as Saudi Arabia and Iran, where natural gas continues to displace oil in the power sector and also supports the expanding economic activity in those countries. In Africa, most of the demand growth in natural gas is driven by improving access to electricity and rising population. And the bulk of that growth is concentrated in Algeria and Egypt. When we are looking at Eurasia, it is a bit of a tricky market these days. But what we see is that the growing demand of gas use in the Russian power sector is going to be offset but by the lower gas use in the industrial sectors, including energy industry own use. For the South and Central America, we expect gas demand to decline, mainly because of the healthy hydro availability, including in Brazil, and as such, there is less space for gas to power demand. In North America, after the very strong increase in gas demand in 2022, we expect gas consumption to decline by around 2% this year. And this will be driven by all the sectors, including lower gas use for space heating purposes, lower gas use in industry, and lower gas use for power generation. Last but not least, in Europe, we expect gas demand to decline by around 5%. and we will discuss in more detail what is driving this continued demand reduction in the European market. But before going into Europe, let us have a closer look to the Chinese gas market. In 2022, China's gas consumption declined by 1%, marking the first drop in the country's gas demand in 4 decades. And this drop was driven by slowing economic growth, price-driven demand destruction, and widespread lockdowns under China's strict COVID policy. The biggest drop came from the power sector, where the record expansion of renewables and a robust increase in coal-fired generation in a way squeezed out gas-fired power plants from the electricity mix. When we are looking at 2023, we expect that China's gas demand will increase by over 6%, and this will be very much supported by the reopening of the country and the improving economic activity in the country. And as such, industrial gas use will account for over 3/4 of China's incremental gas demand in 2023. Preliminary data indicates that China's industrial gas demand increased by over 10% year-on-year, both in February and March, although the outlook remains highly uncertain. So when we are looking at China's LNG imports, it is notable that they dropped by an unprecedented 20% in 2022. And this was, in fact, a key enabling factor for higher LNG flows into the European market. Now, shipping data suggests that China LNG imports returned to growth in Q1 2023, with LNG inflows reaching double-digit growth both in April and for May. We are also seeing double-digit growth when we are looking at the first half of the month. In our forecast, China's LNG imports will increase in a range between 10 to 15% compared to last year, although they are expected to remain below the record levels reached in 2021. Notably, the majority of this growth will be met by China's existing and new long-term LNG contracts and not via the procurement of spot LNG. And now we would like to go into more in-depth on the European gas market. So this slide shows us demand developments over the 22-23 heating season. And as we noted previously, European gas consumption over that period have declined by a record 55 BCM. And as we can see on this slide, it has been really driven by all the sectors. When we are looking at distribution network related demand, we see that it has declined by over 16% year-on-year. And what is quite important to note here is that the mild weather conditions accounted for only about 40% of this demand reduction. The majority came from other factors, non-weather related factors, including gas saving measures enacted in public and commercial buildings, fuel switching occurring in rural households, efficiency gains, behavior changes, and also rising affordability issues. And here, maybe just to note that according to surveys carried out in recent years, indicates that around 6.9% of European households are not able to heat up their homes to adequate levels. This was the case in 2021, and it is very likely that this situation has worsened quite considerably through the 22-23 heating season. But we also see that gas demand has been declining in the power sector by around 10%. And this has been driven partly by lower electricity consumption, but also improving hydro availability. Last but not least, we see that gas demand continues to be down quite heavily in the industrial sector. And this is due to a combination of factors, including production curtailments, fuel switching, and some efficiency gains on the margin. Now, moving to the supply side, we also see that there are quite important shifts happening in Europe. While the share of Russian piped gas fell to 10% of the European gas demand in the 22-23 heating season, we see that LNG is becoming, in a way, a new baseload source for the European market, accounting for 2/3 of Europe imports and to 1/3 of the region's gas demand through the 22-23 heating season. And here I would like to note that the United States and Qatar are playing a key role, being the first and the second largest LNG supplier to the European market. And together, they account for over 55% of Europe's LNG imports and meet almost 20% of the region's natural gas demand. So that's quite an important shift from the patterns we had in the past. Now, the combination of the steep drop in natural gas demand and the strong record LNG inflow kept the European inventory levels well above their historic averages through the 22-23 winter season. And as a consequence, EU storage sites closed the heating season 55% full, and with inventory levels standing about 22 BCM above their 5-year average. Now, these high inventory levels mean also that in the European Union, half of the last year's storage injections would suffice to reach the 90% fill levels by the start of the 2023-24 heating season. This lower injection demand over the summer of 2023 could potentially contribute to an easing of market fundamentals. So in this context, how we see European gas market evolving and how do we see gas demand evolving? In our latest forecast, we project that European gas demand will decline by approximately 5% in 2023. And this will be largely driven by the lower gas burn in the power sector, where we see a decline of 15% amidst the rapidly expanding renewables. Considering the declines we have seen in Q1, demand in the residential and commercial sectors is expected to decline by 4%. And then when we are looking at gas use in industry, we expect that it will recover by around 5% as lower gas prices enable some demand recovery through the second half of the year in the most gas and energy intensive industries. So this chart gives us a bit of history, and it shows us how the reliance of the European Union on Russian piped gas increased over the years. It also tells us a story, a lesson that we should never ignore red flags. Back in 2004, when Russia met around 30% of the EU's gas demand, the IEA's chief economist, Dr. Fatih Birol, already called for a diversification of supplies. But as we can see on this slide, the reliance on Russian gas increased over the last 2 decades, despite all the warning signs, including the gas supply cuts, the gas transit cuts, via Ukraine in 2006 and 2009, or in 2014, Russia's annexation of Crimea. And we can see on this slide that the share of Russian piped gas reached quite record levels in 2018-19, and then we also see this steep drop occurring in 2022, when the share of Russia's piped gas declined to around 15% of EU's gas demand. And we also see on the light blue line that the share of LNG increased to around 30% of EU's gas demand in 2022. Looking at 2023, we expect this trend to continue, although the profile of Russian piped gas deliveries remains a key uncertainty. Assuming that flows to the European Union continue at their Q1 levels, Russian piped gas deliveries would drop by close to 60% year-on-year, a decline of around 35 BCM compared to 2022. And in this context, LNG imports are expected to remain broadly flat compared to last year. Following the strong increase in Q1, OECD Europe's LNG inflows are expected to decline through the remainder of the year amidst lower injection needs and a continued decline in European gas demand. So altogether, what we see is that global gas markets and the European gas market is moving towards a gradual rebalancing. However, this improved market outlook should not be a distraction from the exogenous risks which could break this fragile balance. And there is a wide range of uncertainties ahead of 2023. This includes adverse weather factors such as a dry summer or a cold Q4, a potential lower availability of LNG, and the possibility of a further decline in Russian piped gas deliveries to the European Union. Hence, in this context, keeping demand in check will be crucial to ensure a safe and secure gas balance for the European Union in 2023. And we need to aim to reduce natural gas in a structured manner through improving energy efficiency, continuing expanding renewables, and also accelerate the deployment of heat pumps and encouraging behavioral changes. And with this, I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Megumi Kotani, who will brings us to the exotic waters of e-methane developments. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Gergely. I am Megumi Kotani, a hydrogen analyst of the IEA. I would like to also thank EarthNA for organizing this event, and thank you for the participants for joining us today. In the following section, I will be presenting the highlights on e-methane from the quarterly gas market report. I will first describe the taxonomy, the costs, and the modes of production, as well as the challenges and opportunities which lie for this particular market. Then I would like to share some examples of e-methane projects in Japan. To begin, e-methane refers to synthetic methane produced from electrolytic hydrogen. While natural gas could certainly be decarbonized with CCS, e-methane only refers to methane production based on renewable hydrogen. E-methane is produced through a two-step process. Low-emission electricity is first converted to hydrogen by electrolysis, and the resulting hydrogen is then reacted with a carbon source. There are currently two main methanation technologies available for demonstration, categorized as either catalytic or biological. Catalytic methanation involves reactions performed under high pressure and temperature conditions ranging from around 200 to 700 degrees and 1 to 100 bar. The technology readiness is at pre-commercial demonstration of a prototype with system efficiency of around 80%. The biological methanation is performed by microorganisms at comparatively low pressure and temperatures of around 30 to 70 degrees. This technology is not yet commercially available and is expected to have a lower efficiency of around 55 to 60% in comparison to the catalytic methanation. In terms of the levelized cost of production, IEA estimates the current e-methane production costs to be in the range of US dollars 50 to 200 per million British thermal units, which could be 70 to 160 times higher than the low emission hydrogen costs, currently in the range to 3 to 9 US dollars per kilogram of hydrogen. Both CapEx and OpEx are still high. The CapEx is around 1,000 US dollars per kilowatt, which could decline to around 500 US dollars per kilowatt by 2050. In the APS scenario, the total cost of production could decline to a range of 25 to 110 US dollars per kilowatt by 2030. While costs are high today, e-methane offers strategic advantages for certain jurisdictions. By being interchangeable with natural gas, e-methane can be used in existing gas infrastructure, including storage tanks and end-use applications without the need of retrofitting, which could lead to significant cost savings. For instance, the typical foam insulation used for LNG pipelines are unsuitable for liquid hydrogen, which instead require vacuum insulation, hiking pipeline costs by 5 to 10 times per unit of length. In addition, the costs of constructing a new LNG storage tank is 2/3 of that of hydrogen of a comparable volume, which allows for greater flexibility in meeting seasonal and short-term energy demand swings. Adopting e-methane would also link hydrogen networks by enabling the conversion of hydrogen to e-methane, which may be useful for several sectors where natural gas is already widely adopted. Next, I would like to provide a regional focus on the status of e-methane deployment in Japan. The government of Japan considers methanation as a key component of its strategy to decarbonize its gas supply. The country's 6th Strategic Energy Plan set a target for synthetic methane to comprise 1% of the gas supply in existing networks by 2030, increasing to 90% by 2050. Japan aims to reduce e-methane costs to 120 yen per normal cubic meter, which is around 25 US dollars per million British thermal units by 2030, and down further to 15 yen per normal cubic meter by 2050, which is around US dollars 10 per million British thermal units. The country's strategic energy plan aims to ramp up annual e-methane supply to 0.28 million tons by 2030 and 25 million tons by 2050. This amount excludes direct hydrogen, biogas, and other direct use of non-fossil fuels. To achieve this target, the government administers funds dedicated to e-methane through the New Energy and Industrial Technology Development Organization, in short NEDO, and provides R&D funding under the Green Innovation Fund. In 2017, the government launched a 5-year program worth 14 million US dollars. Sorry, can I just cough a bit? All right. I inhaled something. In 2017,
Your time, Megumi.
thank you. In 2017, so we were at NEDO, which provides R&D funding under the R&D funding and some under the Green Innovation Fund, which is something apart from the government budget. In 2017, the government launched a 5-year program worth $14 million to demonstrate the viability of methanation technologies. The new Green Transformation Program is set to provide another major funding boost. Several Japanese enterprises have embarked on e-methane production projects. In 2024, INPEX and Osaka Gas will lead the largest domestic project in Nagoya, which is in the direction towards Mount Fuji from Tokyo, with plans to produce 60,000 cubic meters per hour in the commercial phase. Most recently, JFE Steel Corporation and IHI Corporation are developing the world's largest methanation system. The plant will be able to produce 500 cubic meters per hour of e-methane by using 24 tons of carbon dioxide per day from exhaust gas derived from a test blast furnace. Operations are scheduled to begin in 2024. In addition to domestic demonstration projects, Japanese utilities and trading houses have started to jointly explore the feasibility of developing e-methane supply chains with LNG exporting countries like Qatar. While no binding agreements have been reached yet, these recent project proposals could potentially enable 0.4 million tons per year or 0.55 BCM per year of e-methane imports into Japan by 2030. This would equate to around 0.6% of Japan's natural gas consumption in 2022. In conclusion, for major natural gas importers like Japan, e-methane is selected as means to decarbonize the gas supply. The costs of low-emission electricity and hydrogen will be key to enhance its cost competitiveness. Further research is needed to commercialize these technologies and increase their efficiency. Nonetheless, there are major cost-saving opportunities from being able to use existing natural gas pipelines, LNG terminals, and storage tanks without the need of repurposing. For further information on the quarterly gas market report, the report is available online. Please find more about the report and other publications on our website, iea.org. Thank you again for joining our presentation today. Now I would like to give the floor back.
Thank you very much. Thank you both to Gergely and to Megumi for summarizing the report and highlighting such a very interesting issues that you are reporting on. There is already one question, but before that, we will give the floor to Dr. Marcello Contestabili, Chief Economist at KIRI here in Doha, who will react to the report and raise a couple of issues. Marcello.
Gonzalo, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and it's my pleasure and honor to give a quick reaction to the report that was just presented by the colleague of the International Energy Agency. So what I'm going to focus on is the longer-term implications of the gas market disruption that Gergely has described in quite some detail, and he's focused on what this disruption has meant so far and what he expects for the remainder of the year. Whereas I'm going to look a little beyond, and I'm also going to make some quick remarks on the implications for natural gas of the emergence of low carbon gases such as e-methane. So first of all, the disruption that we've seen caused by the Russian invasion of Ukraine has been the largest by far that natural gas markets have seen so far. We've seen governments react to that, and these reactions have been both short-term and looking at the long-term. Clearly, this disruption has brought energy security back to the fore and rivaling in importance with decarbonization. And by prioritizing energy security, the governments around the world have looked at, on the one hand, supporting the expansion of domestic energy supplies. On the other hand, of course, also the potential diversification of imports. When it comes to the expansion of domestic energy supplies, much of the emphasis really is on renewables. So this means, I mean, and examples, clear examples are the REPowerEU program in the European Union and the IRA program in the US, but several other countries have reacted similarly. So this has led to a downward revision of demand outlooks for fossil fuels. So if we compare the major outlooks of the last few months with the previous editions, we can see a marked further decline in fossil fuel demand over the long term. Of all fossil fuels, however, natural gas is certainly the most resilient. So projections generally suggest that demand for natural gas might still be sustained up to 2030, and then its decline will depend on the rate at which we can introduce renewables and energy saving measures. So this development clearly challenges the idea of natural gas as a energy transition partner, but it certainly doesn't completely remove it. So the market for natural gas will still remain substantial in the coming decades, and natural gas will still have a substantial scope for displacing coal, like it has done in the past, especially in markets like China and India under the right circumstances. And it's also important to remark that while the market for natural gas as a whole is expected to decline faster, the market for liquefied natural gas will suffer less. And this is because of partly the need to fill the gap that has been created by the reduction of supplies through pipelines, and partly because LNG has characteristics that make it more secure as a form of natural gas supply than pipelines, because it's easier to diversify suppliers through LNG than it is by pipeline. So again, market projections for natural gas on a downward trend, LNG market a bit more favorable, and certainly a market that has positive prospects is that of low carbon gases, such as e-methane, as was very clearly illustrated. But there is also potential for natural gas to contribute to the low carbon gas market through its conversion into blue hydrogen, which could make up for some of the demand reductions, and which can complement very well e-fuels due to the different profile and the different cost and level of maturity. So this is all from me, and I thank again Gonzalo for the nice introduction and our colleagues from the IEA, and I open the floor to the Q&A section.
Thank you very much, Marcello. And then the floor is back to Gergely and Megumi, whether you want to react to what Marcello just said. And also there is a question from Saz Shanak. How can we ensure the production and use of synthetic methane is done in a sustainable way and the benefits of synthetic methane production are shared equitably?
I can start off with this, if that's okay, Gergely. The production and the use of synthetic methane will be discussed in depth at the government level once, probably after the hydrogen market is further developed. E-methane is still at a very early development phase. So when we do not have, or when we are currently trying to figure out how to calculate emissions from hydrogen, and Europe is also thinking about the uses of renewable electricity, whether or not it has to be connected to facilities or not, directly to the facilities, or this discussion is currently underway, and we can ensure it by making these discussions into regulations that other governments and jurisdictions can adopt. The benefits of synthetic methane production can be shared equally. That, I guess, it would depend how long-term this project will be. I don't know if this the question considers both capex and opex. The benefits, I think it would first be produced at a loss, and the public sector will be covering for the majority of the funding that is necessary to develop the technologies that are used for e-methane production, and the relevant infrastructure that is necessary and associated with it, as it is a high-risk project at the moment. And once this project matures, I think the benefits will be shared more equally between the private sector.
Thank you, Megumi. Gargely, would you like to comment?
Yes, no, thank you for this question. I think that on the first part, how to ensure that it is clean, the definition of e-methane is a way already defines a clean pathway, so that it is produced from low emission electricity, or using potentially gases which are resulting from industrial operations, but in those cases, I think it is important that then any emissions which are associated with e-methane are offset through, for instance, carbon offset mechanisms. So we have seen already these mechanisms emerging in the case of LNG, and this could be potentially also implemented to synthetic methane or e-methane in the future. And in terms of the distribution of the benefits of e-methane, I think here again it is very important that there is a close cooperation between producers and consumers when this potential technology is being scaled up. If we look back to the history of the LNG market, it has been this cooperation between producers and consumers was at the heart of the beginning of the LNG industry. And we think that when we are looking at Japan's strategy in terms of supporting different international e-methane projects, this is following a similar logic. And this will contribute to distribution of the benefits across consuming and the producing economies. So I think that the main challenge when we look at the e-methane is really the cost challenge and how to bring it down. As Megumi noted, today the cost of e-methane is somewhere between $50 to $200 per MMBTU. We have seen how difficult is for the economy to have such high prices. Last year in Europe, TTF averaged at $40 per MMBTU, and it had very significant and painful impacts on the European gas industry and the society as well. So I think that really the key element is the cost, and here we need more innovation, more scale up, steeper learning curves, and learning by doing.
Great, thank you, Gergely. And I think there is another question also for you, given that you guys at the IEA are in the business of visualizing the future. Here is a question: what is the future of energy in light of an advanced technology acceleration every hour? Is there an island future? So an opportunity for you to tell us how you see the future of energy and where are we going?
Yeah, so maybe yes, it is of course a very broad and a very complex question, but I think one macro trend we see is the trend towards electrification. But this being said, in all our scenarios, we see an important role for molecules, including gaseous molecules, which have a role to play either in providing backup in the power sector, contributing to the high heat processes in industry, but also contributing to long distance transport, and also ensuring seasonal variability in energy demand. So I think that the gaseous fuels are here to stay. Of course, the gas market is becoming more dynamic, more diverse in a way. But yes, so the macro trend is towards electrification, towards electrons, but molecules are here to stay, and the value of these molecules might be also gaining in importance, because when you need them, you really need them. So there is also this sort of system and security factor included in that. But maybe Megumi and Marcello, you would like to contribute to that question?
Thank you. I absolutely agree, Gergely. The population is growing worldwide, and when we talk about trends, we don't really look into country by country basis in many cases. And not every country can adopt hydrogen nor e-methane at the same pace as some advanced economies. And when we talk about energy technology acceleration, we often forget that electrification can only decarbonize certain sectors, whereas for example, liquid hydrogen is needed in the in heavy industries because we need heat to combust, and it's like electricity is not just going to decarbonize these hard to abate sectors. And for this is like something that Gergely I think mentioned earlier, that gas will always have a role to play. And in these sectors, to decarbonize the consumption of natural gas, there is an opportunity to use e-methane. And the ways that we are researching and developing technologies is to decarbonize these type of sectors. And that's very interesting. Like we have like increasingly more and more different types of alternatives to choose from. And that's something to look forward to.
Great, thank you, Megumi. And now I think we have time for one more question, and this maybe goes to Marcello. How can renewable energy become enticing to gas-producing countries like Qatar? And how can these countries become more sustainable while still producing gas from a cost-benefit viewpoint?
Thank you, Gonzalo. So this is a very interesting question and one that we've been obviously looking at for some time. So the short answer is renewable energy is definitely of much interest to oil and gas exporting countries that we're seeing with Qatar increasing its development of solar PV. Saudi Arabia, just to give another regional example, doing the same thing. But if we go further away, take Australia, for example, they're doing just that. I mean, they're a major exporter of LNG, and they're also ramping up their renewable capacity. So going back to the specifics of Qatar, what can renewable energy do for Qatar? Very many things, I would say. First of all, it can help reduce the carbon intensity of the LNG that Qatar exports by using this renewable energy, for example, to support liquefaction of natural gas. That already reduces the carbon content, the carbon intensity of the natural gas. Similarly, for other processes, with industrial processes. Solar power can also be used to displace domestic use of natural gas for residential and other uses. So again, it can free up more natural gas for export, and that's another benefit. Longer term, this is more the case perhaps for countries that have more space available. Renewables can be used to produce e-fuels, green hydrogen and others, which can complement the offer of low carbon fuels that these countries are able to produce. So I guess the answer is certainly renewables are a very interesting complement and are much needed to decarbonize both exports and the national energy systems.
Great, thank you, Marcello. I think that with that, being 3 o'clock, I really want to thank Gergely and Megumi and the IEA for this great opportunity, and to Marcello for commenting, and to all of the participants. And just remind you that the report is available in the website of the IEA, but it's also available here on your chat button. So if you want to download it, you can do it now. Again, thank you, Gergely, Megumi, Marcello, and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.